Alright guys, TouchCrub here back again today. Hope you're enjoying your Friday so far, and this I believe is a topic which has been a long time coming on this channel. Way back in April we talked about the possibility of Toronto Ultra holding Looney hostage on that team during the pandemic, and now Crimsix absolutely exposes this organisation over the last 12 hours or so. Remarkable stuff, to be honest, not exactly surprising based on things I've heard behind the scenes, but definitely not the kind of thing we want to see in the CDL. We hoped that with franchising coming into play, that would be the end of kind of scummy organisations in Call of Duty that we saw especially throughout the Black Ops 4 season and in the past, the likes of Denial, the likes of Accelerate, the likes of Red Reserve. But here with Toronto Ultra again, we get some very questionable management decisions being made, and that's the most generous way to possibly describe it. Like if you guys enjoy the video, subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Help support the channel. Thank you for doing that. Let's hop into things then. So back in April, these were the tweets that I was discussing. 26th of April, M, so that's Looney's fiance. At this rate, I'm not going to see Danny, that being Looney of course, until August, because Toronto is telling him he cannot go home because the government is advising against it, and they don't know if he'd be able to get back in once he was in the States. So this is the big question mark. Looney played for Ultra earlier this season as a starter, then he moved to the bench for pretty much the rest of the season. But Toronto seem to have a clause in some of the contracts, or pretty much all the contracts, that if you want to play for them, you have to be based in Toronto. And well, apparently, as Crimsix will go on to say, this is against the rules of the CDL. Apparently there's another clause in the contract elsewhere that says that you can't force players to do this. You can't force players to geolocate in order to compete for your team. But Toronto apparently have been doing it regardless. And at the time, Clayster says this seems ridiculous. Hastro, of course, owner of the Dallas Empire, wanted us all to be here in Dallas, but understood Kyler, that being Hook, and Inda, that being Illy, going home to be with their families in the crazy time. You know, sorry to hear about that. And well, as M says, they won't pay him if he actually just says, you know, screw it, and ends up leaving anyway. So fast forward to the present day, and we get this that comes out from Crimsix. This just pissed me off. Looney makes the people around him better, an often ignored attribute in CoD because it cannot be quantified. Ultra forced their full roster of 10 to stay in Toronto in the middle of a pandemic, threatening not to pay non-starters if they went home, just as we saw about with Looney. So I'll share a quick clip from this podcast that came out, the CA Ultra. I imagine these guys must be affiliated with Ultra to some degree. Not exactly sure what's going on, but well, they certainly haven't followed CoD for too long. They have an opinion on whether Looney should be on the starting lineup or not, and well, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but certainly this rubbed some of the pros up the wrong way, and well, Crimsix started firing absolute lightning bolts.
This is kind of what makes me think of that. It's the Friendship League, if you have Looney on there. He gave no reason.
He used to play with Gunless, he used to play with, yeah.
It literally is that. Like, there's no reason why he should be picked up this year. He gave us no reason to keep him on the team on Ultra. And I think that the other people out there that perform better than him that didn't get a spot.
Yeah, and people are sitting there going like, sorry, I'm cutting you off, but just because I want to give you, because some people are like, what? It's Looney. How did you see him in 2018? But like, some people are like, yeah, like he was a monster on 4v4. I was like, man, he was a monster 2 years ago when he was, 25, not 28 on World War II, which is arguably an extremely different game than one we're currently going to be playing. Like, that's not a good enough reason to pick him up, in my opinion. That's so risky. Like, since age obviously plays a part, the game mechanics play a part, new talent coming in plays a part.
Silly then comes back to Crimsix and says, I commented on Reddit with something similar to what you just said. Also, considering I haven't really seen these guys before, I assume that contributes to their poor CoD knowledge. The fact that people keep pushing the age narrative after Clayster, the oldest player in the league, of course, won the World Championship 2 years in a row, is mind-blowing to me. And Looney replies with, I appreciate it, brother, it is what it is, and people will have to have their opinions. Just gonna keep my head down and grind, just has to prove them wrong. And well, nameless guys are clueless. Just ignore the hell out of this. So it seems like this Chris guy was only just getting into Call of Duty back in like January time. This tweet was pointed out, just trying to learn the CoD League on the 27th of January. But of course, it doesn't end there. Crimsix goes on to fire some further daggers. Number 2 continued, despite winning the Toronto home series leading up to champs. Brack, of course, who was a great player throughout Black Ops 4. He was on that Midnight team early on. Then he went on to Accelerate, I believe. Then he was on the Denial squad, and then he got picked up by Luminosity Gaming towards the end of the season. So a bit of a nightmare run he had, especially with some of those organizations that were very questionable indeed. But Brack never played a single league match on this squad, was on the bench this entire season. The Toronto 10-man project didn't really work out for Brack or Mayhem, or Lucky on that team, of course. Had to fight Ultra to return home for his grandpa's open heart surgery. There was absolutely no chance he would have subbed in. And this is something I remember hearing about at the time, but there wasn't enough stuff coming forwards about it. And I imagine if you're in a position like Brack and you start to say stuff about this publicly, all of a sudden, like, Toronto are just going to cut you or something like that, and you end up not necessarily getting picked up by other organizations, and you put your career in jeopardy to some degree. But I mean, this is just disgusting behavior, right, if this is true. And as Crimsix says, there's rumors that these clowns wanted a 50-50 prize-winning split. I mean, Crimsix has talked quite recently about how he doesn't think the prize-winning split is a good idea, and he should, well, split it 100% towards the players so that they have incentive to actually be the best players they can possibly be and play to win, rather than just playing to keep their league spots. But, you know, on another vein here, they want a 50-50 prize-winning split from their players while underpaying them. If the prize split goes up, so must the salary. This is the exact opposite of what they're doing. One of the most anti-player organizations that I have ever seen. And, well, it doesn't stop here. Brack then replies, they still aren't paying me, by the way. So what he says was he does actually end up going home. A full month's worth of salary they aren't paying me because I was with my grandpa. So Brack just said, like, you know, screw you. Like, I'm just going to go home and see my family, like, in this difficult time, obviously. And now he says they still aren't paying him a full month's worth of salary because I was with my grandpa during a high-risk open heart surgery. Now I got to fight through challenges because an opportunity never opened up when I grinded respawn S&D all year. So a really, really tough situation for Brack. It really is horrible to see. And I mean, this is the continuation from it, right? So there's a couple of replies to this one. So Crimsix replies, the org's side was that they have already heard the grandpa excuse to go home. I mean, if this is true, this does honestly just make me sick to my stomach. Like, what am I reading? It was from Classic. So yeah, the Classic stuff as well. It was in a similar situation, actually, with Classic going home. I think Brack's grandpa was okay, but yeah, I remember this at the time being talked about, like, which I'm 95% sure, if I'm remembering correctly, his grandpa actually passed away. So I think a similar thing happened with Classic, that he had to go home. I mean, like, just what a horrible time for these players that were stuck on this team. They literally thought Brack was just making up some BS. There was zero reason to hold him in Canada. I mean, absolutely unbelievable to read. You know, I can't imagine what these players were going through on their personal lives at the time. And, well, Crimsix then does reply. So the guys on the podcast, they come back to it. Initially, like, Overwatch stuff, but obviously they talk about Call of Duty as well. They talk about some points here, and they don't necessarily talk about the Ultra. But, well, Crimsix comes back regardless. Ultra deceived and lied to the players to stating they contractually that they had to stay. Except contractually, there was another segment to their contract stating that orgs cannot force players to live in a required location for salary payments. It was in every CDL contract. So Crim is saying that the CDL have a clause in the contract that says you cannot tie a player down to a specific location and, well, not pay them if they leave that location. However, apparently Ultra deceived and lied to the players to actually stating that contractually they had to stay. So this is where, like, lawyers come into it, and you've got the considerations, because this is where I feel really bad a lot of the times for esports players, because I imagine that a lot of these players were getting picked up to the Ultra and were thinking, like, damn, like, a team actually wants to pick me up, especially some of these more amateur guys, the likes of Cleanix, yeah, like Mayhem, for example. They come onto the team last season and are probably just really happy to get a spot in a franchise league full stop, are not really too worried about exactly what the contract happens to look like, and, well, some of the situations in Brack, for example, as well, that might come back to haunt them later down the line. This is the reply to Cleanix. I don't know what Cleanix said here at the time, but, well, Crim says, I'm hoping you had a lawyer look over / advise those original contracts that they conveniently extended, while at the same time cut the other remaining contracts. So, of course, with Cleanix being extended onto this, well, roster for the next season, and, well, his contract being extended as kind of a 1+1 thing going on there, you know, as he says, I hope you had a lawyer look over and advise that, because otherwise they might be stuck in a similar predicament for next season. Cut the other remaining contracts. I'm assuming you're getting paid low numbers despite you and Cammy showcasing superstar talent throughout last season. So a huge indictment from Crimsix on the Toronto Ultra organization as a whole. Very intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below on this one. What do you think about Toronto as a result of this? I do not believe Crimsix is saying any of this. I don't think he's making any of this up. Heard a few of these things over time, but given a lot of the tweets weren't coming out at the time and was somewhat difficult to piece together, I didn't make a video on it since the Looney stuff back in April. However, with Crimsix now coming out and absolutely blasting them publicly like this, something has to be done, right? Some statement surely has to be made by the Toronto Ultra, and surely to some degree the league will have to step in. If this is true that they are lying and deceiving their players in what their contracts actually state, that is absolutely egregious. The people responsible for this should be ashamed of themselves, and we have to look going forward at what the potential punishments could be and what the future stands for the Toronto Ultra and the players more generally. Is a players union on the horizon? Certainly something to be considered right now, and I know that Crimsix and I think Octane have been talking about that a little bit. I'm sure that's a discussion we can have in the coming days. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'd greatly appreciate a like on it if you did enjoy. Just to finish on a slightly brighter note, Hector is doing an eavesdrop podcast with Mental, so I'm sure that's going to be pretty interesting when this comes out over the coming days. days. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Drop a like on it if you enjoyed it. It helps the YouTube algorithm know you like this content. Other people may enjoy it too. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.